So you need a white cake, a wedding cake, just an all-purpose cake. This is a good one. Very light, delicious. Hey, today I'm going to be making a white cake and I'm going to be baking from the new kitchen, all right? So this is going to be a lot of fun. Hey, this is a great cake. What I decided to do when one of my viewers wrote in, her name was Sherry here, she said, would you please do a recipe for white cake? And I replied, yes, I'll do a recipe for white cake, but give me some time because I'm not doing cakes right now. I'll be doing that later on. So here it is. It's happened to now. White cake. Now this isn't one of the, a lot of times I pull out like historic recipes and stuff like that. And this is not one of those. This is one of the recipes I decided last week I want to develop my own white cake recipe because there's certain qualities, certain textures that I want in my white cake recipe. So this white cake is what they call a foam cake actually, and I'll teach you what that means later, but foam cakes are really cool in that they provide a very, very light, soft, delicate texture. Angel food cake, for instance, is a foam cake. Now this will not have the texture of angel food cake. It won't have that springy, wacky, weird texture that angel food cake has, but it's about halfway there. All right, it's very light, very soft, and very palatable. This is a vanilla cake that I'm going to make today, and you can make this cake in other flavors, like if you wanted to do almond. Just use half of the amount of almond as I'm using of vanilla, and boom, you've got a fantastic tasting cake and a fantastic tasting buttercream to go with it. This cake I developed as a vanilla cake, and it has a little bit of color to the cake itself, as you've seen, that is unavoidable. And it's because the vanilla is a dark brown ingredient. That's one ingredient that kind of throws everything off a little bit. I couldn't find any clear vanilla. Maybe it's there. I'm not going to go searching for it though. Bleached out vanilla is not one of the things I'm interested in. But I tell you what, if you want your cake to be a little whiter and to have a unique flavor, you could do like hazelnut. That'd be cool. You could do an almond cake. You could do a lot of different flavors. You could do orange, you could do lime, lemon, and they all will come out fantastic as a white cake. So white cakes can be any flavor, and well, this one is going to be vanilla and it's going to be good. So folks, tell you what, come over this way. We're going to take a look at these ingredients and discuss how to make a fantastic white cake. The ingredients I'm using today, let's start over here with our frosting. It's a pound of butter to a pound of powdered sugar. Just that simple. But we're going to sift off that powdered sugar. We have over here some sugar and milk and flour. Not any old flour. This is cake flour, also known as low gluten flour. I have eggs, vanilla, butter, salt, and baking powder. And those are basic ingredients for a fantastic cake. It's what you do with the ingredients that makes a difference in how the cake comes out. And I want to show you a trick to turn this into a light, fluffy, airy cake. What we call in the baking industry a foam cake. It's a pretty cool way of doing things. Now, only one other thing I can think of that you're going to be needing, and that's going to be something to grease and flour your pans with. You can either do that just by rubbing on some butter or some fat of some type, whether it be lard or shortening or tallow even, and then dusting the pans with flour. Or you can use a spray-on coating. I'm using a commercial one here. I also have a common one that's used for household use. They are identical, folks. It's just a cooking spray that's got flour in it, and it's great for baking. So let me show you what we do to make this fantastic cake. Let's move right into it. There's a couple of processes that we have to do before we can make this cake. Process number one is I have to take my flour right here and get it down in the sifter. So I'll try to do this without making too much of a mess. I'll be straight up with you. Normally I don't do this setup method when I'm baking for myself. I'll simply measure everything right there into my sifter and allow the sifter to do its job, okay? I'm doing this mise en place method of cooking because it's a better way to teach people what we're using, how we're doing it. And that's the reason you see me doing it on cakes like this. Otherwise, I would just measure straight into my sifter and then sift it out into a bowl, and I'm ready to go, okay? Now, by the way, in case you're wondering, yes, you can place the sifter and the bowl on top of the scale when you are weighing out your ingredients, okay? If you don't have a scale for weighing ingredients, okay, folks, that's going to be one of the focuses on this season, is learning to use a scale, learning to convert recipes and stuff like that. And that is because these days, more and more recipes are going to be done, you know, as metric equations. It's easier for the chefs that are putting together the recipes to do it that way, and the recipes come out more consistent and better. There we have it. Our flour's all sifted out and ready to go. The other process we need to do, I'm going to take these eggs and I'm going to crack each one of them. And I'm going to do separating the egg from the yolk. All right, now there's a lot of different ways of doing this, folks. You can actually open up an egg, pour it into your hand. The white will run between your fingers and your hand can catch the yolk. All right, just drop it into your hand, let it drop into a bowl that way. Neat way of doing it. Also, I like to just do an old-fashioned method where I crack the egg, hold the egg vertical, peel the shell open from the top. That most of the white runs out at that point. Then I take that yolk and toss it to the other side of the shell, and the rest of the white pours on out. Another way of doing it that I like to do, it's just quicker for me. So use either method you prefer. You know, almost every time that I try to teach this method, I flub it somehow, and I'm kind of half expecting that this time. So the thing of it is, what we got to do is separate the egg from the yolk. And the old technique that has been taught over eons, I guess, to do this is to pass the yolk from side to side in the open shell. All right, and then we put the yolk in the bowl that we're going to be mixing in. Now, why do I not crack the yolk into the bowl I'm mixing in? Well, I could get some shells in there. I might accidentally break the yolk and taint the whole batch. Let's say I'm on the 5th one or the 6th one. That means I've messed up everything that's in there. Doing it this way, I could only mess up one egg at a time. All right, so first, let's crack this egg. We're going to open him up by removing the top of the shell. See, I'm holding it vertical. Then I take that yolk, just pass him off to the other side, nice and pretty. Do it again. Done. And guess what? We have separated the yolk from the white and done a beautiful job of it right there. Now, when you're using this method, again, we don't want to taint this yolk because we've got it right. Let's place it right down into our mixing bowl and move straight on to the next one. Well, there it is. That was the last one I've cracked. And it looks like I did make one mistake. I did accidentally break one of the yolks open. So I have 5 eggs whole and 1 broken egg yolk right there. So that's that. That happens. Okay, don't worry about it. We'll use these in other recipes. I have my butter here. My egg white is in the other bowl in my other mixer. Now I'm a fortunate person to have 2 of these little gems. One of them was a gift to me, so I can thank that person. She was very kind. This recipe requires 2 processes. One is creaming the butter. The other is beating the egg whites until they are stiff. Okay, we want stiff peaks on that. This dual process is important because it makes that's part of what makes the cake light and airy. A lot of beginning bakers mess this up. Go ahead, don't be afraid of beating that butter until it has doubled in bulk and turned almost white. Okay, and that's what we're going to do now. And don't be afraid of it. We're going to give it time. After it has turned white and it has doubled in bulk, then I'm going to gently work in the flour. After the flour is fully incorporated, then we start adding the vanilla, milk, and the dry ingredients that have already been sifted. Once this batter is made, that's when I do my egg. The egg doesn't take long. It's a pretty quick process. So I do it second and then fold the two together with a paddle and one of these machines. You can do it by hand also. Either way works. This is going to make 3 9-inch cakes that are about 1 inch thick each. Sometimes 1 1/4. It just depends on how you set yours up. Make sure your cake pans have been greased and floured, and this is an important process. The spray-on type is very, very helpful. Something I like to do on these tutorials, and sometimes they are a bit long and a bit windy, but you need to understand, I am teaching to a mixed crowd here, all right? Some people have never cooked at all. Others have experience. So cut me a break, all right? We always use best practices in cake making, and that begins with, hey, what are we going to do here? I'm going to take this and scrape the inside of the bowl. And I do this a couple of different times during the process of making a cake. But here I have 2 different colors of yellow, one dark yellow, one light yellow, and that shows that some of what was in this bowl wasn't getting mixed in. All right, and that is the exact reason that we do that right there. Put it back in here, go back to creaming this, and remember, a couple of times along the way as you're making your cake, stop, scrape the bowl down, then move on. Make sure you never use the same spatula for your egg whites as you do for this, because again, any fat whatsoever in the processing of egg whites will cause them to immediately fall, and you will not get a fluffy egg white, you'll simply get a custard. Okay, onward with this. I'm going to turn it white. This has been running for a good solid 5 minutes now, and that was a pretty good speed, about a medium-high speed. And now I have twice as much butter as I had before. Not that there's actually more butter in there. And again, you can see the streaks of colors. All right. I'll give it one more light, fast creaming because of that. But it has basically doubled up, and that's what we're needing. Gives good results. This is absolutely beautiful. Look at the streaks in that. And this is what we need in a good quality butter. This is a butter that's filled with air. It's a butter that's going to give us good rise in the cake. This is best practices when you're making cake. Now we're at a nice low speed. It's time to get that sugar in there. And I want to say this, when you're putting sugar in one of these, don't get in any big rush. Just kind of let it gently work its way in there. And here's the thing, we've already put the air into the butter, all right? So, we're just adding sugar to get it evenly combined. And we try not to dump too much in at once. That way it evenly works its way through the entire butter. Give it a moment to cream. And this is what we call creaming your sugar into your butter. Now, doing a batter, it's important, as I said before, to work those ingredients in slowly. Gently drizzle in the milk while you gently work in your flour, just a little bit of each. All right, this is also a good time for us to get in our vanilla. Mexican vanilla, make sure you shake the bottle. It has a tendency to settle. It is not quite as heavily refined as its American counterpart. And as a result, you get a much more, well, true vanilla bean flavor. A lot of people really like it. I'm one of those people. And this is one of the reasons the white is not totally pure on this cake. This brings it to more like an antique white, I guess you could say. But it's not bad. And folks, at this point, this batter doesn't have to be heavily beat anymore. The part that we needed to have extra air in it has already been done on this part of the recipe. In a little bit, we're going to get to the other part of the recipe, which is the egg whites. Those egg whites, if they are treated the right way, will yield a very light and fluffy cake. And again, the reason we take our time putting ingredients in here is to prevent this machine from throwing those ingredients back out and into our face. So now that I have everything fairly well combined, it's time to stop it once again, open this up, and scrape the bowl. And you might be thinking, wow, if you're going to have to open it up all the time and scrape the bowl, why use the mixer? Hey, you've already seen how much work that mixer's done. Mixers are worth their weight in gold when it comes to baking, folks. And it's definitely worth your money for the investment if you're going to do any baking at all. This is such a work saver, this machine is. And they're worth every penny you pay for them. So you'll know this one right here, I purchased, let me remember this here, I want to say it was either 1985 or 1986, one of the two. That's when I purchased this one, and it has been giving me very good service ever since. And I have, you know, knock on wood, I've really appreciated having this machine. Now, some of the stuff that's thrown out of the bowl shows why I covered my egg whites on the other side. Okay, here's another stir. Here are our egg whites. They are up to room temperature. They really do beat best around 70 to 74 degrees. And so that's what I have it at, is about 73 degrees here. This egg white is going to do a beautiful job fluffing up on us, I'm sure. But you have to make sure, like I said, that the bowl's clean, that your beater's clean, that the spatula you work it with is clean, and the bowl that you place the spatula in has to be clean. They have to be free of fat. No oily residues or fats at all. Now we're going to start this on a medium-low speed, and then once it starts frothing, I'll speed it up and take it to a stiff peak. As a general rule, this is not a long process. So early in the process, I'm going to go ahead and we'll use a timer. I'm just going to click the start button and let it count up. And we'll just kind of watch what happens on this, our little, there we go, put that right up there. Now it's starting to get a little foam build up, if you notice that. And that is the beginning stage of this process. This is what we call making a meringue also. Meringues are made the exact same way with one exception. In a meringue, we add a little bit of acid. The acid is used so that when the meringue is baked, it will get crispy on the outside. It does nothing more than that. So you can add lemon, you can add cream of tartar. Either acids work good when doing a meringue that's baked. This one is going to be folded into a cake. There we go. Right now I'm up to 1 minute and 4 seconds. This has started getting frothy and thick. This generally takes only a couple of minutes. If everything is working right in life. There we go. We take it to that higher speed. We're going to let it beat for a few minutes, and then we'll have our frothy product. Okay, I'm going to turn that off for a moment. Right now it's at 2 minutes 34 seconds. Let's take a look at what we've got going on here. It's not like super stiff yet. It's pretty close, and this is what we're looking for. Actually, we're looking for something that's still just a little bit wet, a little bit soft, kind of cloudy, but able to hold. See here, a stiff peak. When I wiggle it, boom, 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 jiggle. It doesn't go anywhere. It's staying in place. So this is going to do the job just fine, all right? There's one thing I want to do, though, and this is going to be a real quick item. I'm going to simply fold this, or in other words, scrape the edges, and then run it one quick blast to make sure anything that wasn't fully incorporated, and it looks like it is. Okay, one quick hit, and and then we fold the batters together. There it is. Scrape this off. So you notice that it doesn't come up in a big glob on this. If it did, it would be dry, okay? And I don't want to beat it until it's totally dry. I just want it so it's holding a stiff peak like that little guy there, boom, boom, boom. It doesn't go anywhere. And at the same time, it's still moist. And that's where we're at on this one. Now, I'm ready to fold this into my other mixture. All right, I have that white ready to go. I've made myself a little room here. Now look how that white just slides out of that nice clean bowl. Okay, I want to take this, I want to gently fold, all right? And I want to start it this way by hand. I'm not going to complete it this way. I'm going to let my machine over here, that is much better at handling ingredients than I am, I'm going to let it do it. And see, when folding, you just kind of pick the ingredients up and turn them over. And that's, you know, literally its name, fold. Pick it up, turn it over, up and over. So this is where just the good old-fashioned hand tool, that a spatula, comes in handy right there. So now, I'm going to do something, and that's rely on my machine for just a moment. Now, do not run this at high speed, period. We're only gently working the two things together and nothing more. The minute this becomes smooth, the very instant this is smooth, we pour it into our pans. So make sure you have your pans greased and floured and ready to go at this time. Looky there. It is now smooth in its texture. That is the batter we're looking for. My oven is still preheating. I am presently greasing my pans. This is a spray-on coating, and you don't have to go crazy with these. Just get it coated, no more. Now, I could weigh each one of these out, but guess what? I'm not going to bother with that. Come on now, we're just going to approximate here. Nothing has to be perfect on this cake, all right? Nothing. So allow yourself a little liberty to make mistakes and errors and stuff like that when you're first learning to make things like this. Okay, it's not a big deal. The earth will not stop turning. All right, there we go. The next thing we got to do is to level these things out. And the way I do that is I start by taking my spatula and making circles from the center to the edge, just like this. Boom. As I turn the pan, and that way I get my product kind of dispersed and pushed to the edge in an even way. To finish evening it out, I take my spatula and I place it on the edge, or brace my arm against my body so I hold it firm, okay? And I gently rotate this. I rotate the pan while holding the spatula steady, and it shows me my high areas. It also allows me to push some of that batter to my low areas, and that's what I do. And this is one of the ways we help to ensure that when we go to baking a cake that's going to be a layer cake, especially a layer cake, you don't want the center domed up. One of the reasons that center's dome is because the cake is too dry, okay, or the oven's too hot, all right? So we don't have either of those conditions here. Let's go ahead and make sure that we manipulate it so that we get it flat, all right? If I throw it in there like this, I'll have a catastrophe. Okay, I'll get these done quickly, and we'll get them thrown in the oven, okay? So I have my 3 cakes ready for the oven. It's at 350 degrees. And I'm gonna check these in 20 minutes, folks. So get them baked up, come on. There we go. I would like to mention when it's time to test it with a toothpick. The toothpick test, if it comes out clean, the cakes are finished. Pull them out, 12 minutes after that, we take them out of the pan. These two are already out of the oven. They were on the upper rack. There's one more left in there. It's got another 2 minutes left. It's getting browned off on top. And I did the toothpick test. These came out nice. That one that wasn't quite browned yet, the lower rack, still needed a couple of more minutes, and it was a little bit wet on the toothpick. And that's of course how we test. Just take your toothpick, push it straight into the top of your cake, pull it back out, and it either comes out with wet batter on it or it does not. And so this one did not. This cake's already been tested. What's coming out will be tested at that time. Allow these to cool for no more than approximately 10 to 12 minutes. When these get cool enough that you can kind of handle the pan a little bit, that's usually about 10 minutes in, go ahead and simply invert them like so. All right, now this part is real important. You need to invert it a second time. The reason being, the bottom of that cake isn't nearly as prone to sticking to that rack as the top is. So go ahead and just turn it on over. We'll let them finish cooling and then we can build our cake. You cannot put buttercream on a hot cake. It will simply melt. Anytime I make a buttercream, I start with my sugar and I get that sugar sifted. Now there's several reasons you want to sift your sugar. Number one, it makes sure that there's no foreign materials, packing materials or anything like that that sometimes gets into it. All right. It also guarantees that you'll have no lumps in that sugar that will later appear in the buttercream. And then also it is helping to add air. In other words, aerate that sugar, make it more light, more fluffy, and that produces, again, a better quality buttercream, okay? If you'll notice down here, I have placed my butter or my whisk on my beater, my whisk on my mixer, so that I can beat this. Now the reason I didn't use that whisk before when I was making the cake was because I didn't need something that, well, it's not as gentle as the paddle is when it comes to doing the final mixing, and that's where we needed a really gentle thing. I don't like changing out in the middle of a cake either. So I simply do it that way. Normally when I'm creaming butter just by itself, I do want to use the whisk though, because it's a lot faster and frankly does a better job. It will be the same rules this time as last time. I'm trying to make sure that I get as much air as I can possibly whipped into that butter and to make it as light as absolutely possible. Okay, let it double in bulk and become nice and light colored, and then we can get on with adding our sugar. All right, look at this. Look how much lighter in color it has become. It's become very light, and that's what I'm talking about. Our bulk has almost doubled here. The buttercream is very, very light in color. I'm just stopping to stir it one last time before I mix it one last time, and then I will start working in my sugar. Now this last beat won't be as long. So far I've had this beating for right at 5 minutes, and I'm only going to give it just a moment more, another 30 or 40 seconds, and then I'm going to work in my sugar. So we're there. I need to take this to a low speed, and this is important whenever adding a dry ingredient. Once again, like we mentioned earlier, take it to a low speed, then work your dry ingredient in. If you put in too much at once, then the mixer's just going to throw it back out at you. That's all there is to it. So don't do that. Don't try putting all of it in at once. Just a little at a time. All right, this is the time I'm going to go ahead and put in my vanilla. Now again, as with earlier, I shook my vanilla. Some types of vanilla, depending on their processing, it's good to do that. Mexican vanilla is kind of that way. Now I want to say this, when it comes to buttercream and vanilla, the vanilla is going to color it a little bit. As you saw, it colored the cake a little bit. Now it's going to color our vanilla buttercream a little bit, but that can't be avoided. It's just in the nature of the beast. Don't let that bother you. When it's done, you still have a white cake. So as you can see, I have a nice soft product here. And this is what I like to use for a white cake. Because folks, let me explain. A lot of times white cakes are used for weddings. Okay? They're used as an event or as a celebration item, in many cases. Not always, in many cases though. And that white cake, it needs to have certain properties of being really light and moist and delicate and soft. And that buttercream needs to match the quality of that. So if your buttercream is too stiff or too sweet, it's not going to be as pleasurable. So go ahead, make a nice soft one like this, which is equal ratios of butter to sugar. I have my cake rounds here. I have a knife. I have something to put the cake on and a nice little turntable. These things are great. You don't have to have them, but they will make this job easier. If you got a lazy Susan, that'll work. And if you're wondering, where do I store something like that when I'm not using it for baking? Well, why don't you put it in the middle of your table and use it as a lazy Susan? What the heck? Have fun with it. Our buttercream, I'm going to put a little bit right in the middle of this. And the purpose behind that is just to give something that holds the cake in place, all right? So we put just a little buttercream smack in the middle of that. And it actually acts just like a glue. It'll get pressed out and it'll keep that thing from moving. And the thing of it is when it's served up, you'll never know that was there. I need to take my cake rounds, each one, and I'm going to put them right down here. Now you can invert these, go with the bottom or top down, whichever way you want. I like to just put them on there the same way I baked my cake. Now, we are doing what some people might call a crumb coat. But if you're delicate enough with what you're doing, we can get away with turning this into just a total final coat. And that's the way I wanted to do this video and this recipe, was to do it like a single push and show you that a really nice cake can come from a recipe that doesn't require many man hours and a lot of extra work. Okay. All right, now, with each level that we do, we simply put buttercream on each level and stack our cake. We want to make sure that those levels are flat, in other words, even. Now, if I want, I can take a knife and working from the outside in, simply cut like this and then slowly work my way across to create a perfectly flat surface. This surface, if you'll look at my knife, is very, very flat. Okay, and it came out quite even, and that was because of our leveling process. That little bit that we did before baking makes that much difference. So we're just going to cover each one with a little buttercream, starting in the middle and working that buttercream out. And you can do this with the same thing I'm using here, a simple, common kitchen spatula, a rubber kitchen spatula. That's all it takes. And then later on, I have some other tools, cake spatulas that are nice for smoothing up the outer layers and the outside of it. Now this particular buttercream is really soft and it spreads real super easy, and it's going to make for a cake that's not like real glossy or slick on the outside as you've seen, but more kind of looks like a rough troweled look, you could call it. What we're making sure of here, or I'm trying to make sure of, is that I get my edges even enough and high enough. There we go. So in other words, I want a good layer on there that's nice and thick. I want it to overlap the edge just a little bit and give me something for my next layer. Okay, one layer at a time. Here's the next one. Just put him right on there and adjust now. Okay, before it gets really set on there any further. If it needs to be moved, this is the time. Okay, it looks really straight. A little more buttercream. Before we jump into the quantity of all of the ingredients, I wanted to mention to you a lot of my recipes are now going to be done in weight measurements, and this is something you really need to consider. Most professional chefs are doing their recipes this way now. Most of the recipes coming out of Europe are already being done this way. It makes more sense, and I'll explain it. We're doing weight measurements, and we're doing them in grams, and of course that can be converted, to American units, the SAE system, but we don't need to do that. The grams are on all scales, and they're very accurate, okay? And I'm doing that on purpose because you get more accurate, consistent results time after time after time making the same cake. Where if you use volume measurements, that can vary with each and every cake you make, and that's because two different kinds of flour are going to weigh differently, and two different kinds of flour may measure differently, and so you want to get things consistent. So by having a single weight, that gives you that consistency where the measuring cup does not, because it can vary from batch to batch. Also, the type of flour that's used, whether you're using, let's say, an all-purpose or maybe a cake flour, and in this case we're using a cake flour, that does make a difference. So you're going to see all of my recipes like I do here. This is my work from this last week. When I was developing this recipe, I wanted to do my conversions after I had developed it, and that's what I had done here. And it's just a matter of I weigh things out as I go, and then there's my converted recipe. So if you're ever looking to do your own, this is how it's done. Before we get into our ingredients, I want to mention to you that when you're using a scale, it's a lot faster, easier way to do your ingredients, folks. So let me explain to you. I've got a cake recipe here that we're learning, and this is going to be the white cake that I've developed for you. When developing this, I weighed everything out as I measured it. I measured out 1.5 cups of sugar, and the sugar I was using and the way I measured it gave me 320 grams of sugar. And that's what I'm going to do here. We're going to measure out 320 grams. Now at present my scale is set for pounds and ounces. I just have to change my units to grams. There we go. And all I have to do is then just pour in the flour, or the sugar, flour, or whatever it is, right up to the measurement I'm looking for, in this case 320. Now in the event that you do go over a little bit, like happened here, simply pull out some. It's not going to be that hard for you. So there we have our 320 grams of sugar. And here's the thing, folks, as you'll notice, just pouring it in there, that's so much faster and easier to measure something. All right? The only thing that you have to remember to do is when you change bowls on your scale, it's going to weigh differently, and you have to kind of zero that out. So we'll push this. There it goes. It zeroed it out. Now I can weigh in my flour, and it's going to be the same thing, 320 grams. So I'll just pour flour into this until I reach what I need. Okay? Do your recipes this way and learn to appreciate this, because this makes it so easy. And if you're worried about the cost of one of these little guys, this one right here I paid about $19 for. Okay, so I didn't want to break the bank. I wanted to make sure I used something really inexpensive so that my viewers don't have to go out and break the bank to have the right thing in their kitchen. This makes cooking a breeze, and your cakes will come out exactly the same every time doing it this way. The quantity of all of the ingredients that we use today, let's start over here again with that wonderful buttercream that we made. Now in US measurements, this is 1 pound of butter to 1 pound of powdered sugar. And in metric measurements, you're looking at 453 grams here, 453 grams here, and a couple of milliliters of some vanilla. That's it. You're off and running with a delicious frosting. Now on the ingredient quantity for the cake itself, I had 320 grams both for the sugar and for the flour. And again, I stress, you cannot use a regular all-purpose flour here. It needs to be a cake flour. It has to be a low gluten flour, and that's very important to the structure of the cake. We have some milk that we use for that. You can say 250 milliliters or 1 cup of milk. I used 1 stick of butter in the United States. That's 1/4 pound, or 113 grams. Now, when it comes to the salt and the baking powder, if you're using US measurements, that would be I believe 1/4 teaspoon, if I remember. No, 1/2 teaspoon, I'm sorry. 1/2 teaspoon of salt and a tablespoon of baking powder. Or in our converted measurements, that would be 2 milliliters here on the salt, 1/2 teaspoon. And over here, you're looking at, let's see, what was that? 13 grams on the baking powder. Simple enough. I used 4 milliliters, or 2 teaspoons of the vanilla, and 6 egg whites. That, when done the right way, made the beautiful cake that you saw being made. Let's take a look at what it looks like when it's all finished up. Okay, as you can see, I've got my top tier already on there, and I'm about to get onto the sides. Now, something I want to do is just kind of smooth this out a little bit. And this is where that turntable really comes in handy. And of course your spatula, being what it is, later we can smooth it up even more. Sides come first though. We got to get the buttercream up the sides. Now you've noticed on the edges, the buttercream's kind of pushing out from the inside of the cake. And that's really what we wanted. If you've got that condition going on, it makes what we're doing now a whole lot easier. Now we're going to try not to get too much of this on the paper below, but if it happens, guess what? Don't lose sleep over it. It won't hurt a thing. Your cake flat that you put it on will be just fine. So just take your buttercream and you can work it up the sides just like this to get it to start applying. Gently though, you don't want to pull too hard. You could tear that gentle cake. Okay? There we go. Now, if I wanted, believe it or not, I could just stop right here and leave this really rough looking. And in that state, it looks finished, all right? It looks finished just due to the fact that it looks intentionally rough. And there's nothing wrong with it, all right? You got a choice there. You get to do it that way, or you get to finish it up, smooth it up a little more. Now that's what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to obsess on it. We're just going to do a quick coat over it and make it nice and smooth and even. And when I'm done, our white cake is ready to go. Now, when it comes to working with cakes, certain tools are very, very handy. They make these cake trowels, okay? These are the same as the pointing trowels that people who do brickwork use, okay? Very similar, and it might be even from that. Trowels like this make cake work like this much, much easier. All right, because you can smooth things out quickly. Now you can do this with a bench scraper also. I like the rounded edges of the trowel. It's not absolutely necessary that you use it. It's just a helpful item that can make things a little easier. Nothing more. Now if you notice, I've got some that's a little shy on the bottom there. So I want to fill that in. And the same trowel, by spinning this cake turntable, smooths that top off rather easily. Okay? Isn't that nice to see? Now this is where, since we've got all things going nice and pretty, we can start adding that extra buttercream to that edge to build it up, okay, and get that nice smooth edge that we're looking for. There we go. So once more, around the cake we go. And also I'm pushing it off the edge just a little bit. I'm going to come back around just like this. Just smooth that down a little. There's a thin spot here. Oh, darn it. So as you can see, just from little weird things like that that happen right there, you just keep working it until eventually you got the whole thing smooth, even, and covered. And it'll get there, okay? Just patience with it. Here's where we go using that little one. And this little guy can really be, you know, a trouble saver when it comes to working cakes. So these little trowels that you see, do not underestimate them. They come in handy at the craziest times. Like what you're seeing me do here. So you see how I'll just take a hole and I'll fill it in. Okay, nothing more than that. A hole here and on that side. Now, I like for this cake to have a little bit of a troweled look to it, like I mentioned earlier. It needs to look like it has been tool worked, and that's all right. There's nothing inappropriate about that look. Okay, so you see how I'm pulling some of that center over to those edges and smoothing it, and then we go around again, same way as before. And there we have it, ladies and gentlemen, one white cake all fixed up and pretty. I want to go ahead and kind of do a little cleanup on the paper around the edge, but other than that, there's really not any more that needs to be done with this. Yeah, you can pipe on some decorating and all kinds of stuff like that, but this recipe and this video was meant to provide an easy cake that's elegant, that almost anybody could do. And occasionally I bump it and do something like that. There we go. Well, I'm going to dome this cake. Okay, put it under glass. If you'll notice, we did the simple tape around the edges. Comes off very easy, a masking tape. And we have our cake already set up on a platform that allows me to pick it up, move it around, and handle it however I'd like. So as a wedding cake, I would probably decorate this a little bit more. If you're looking just for a plain white cake, no frills, that's it right there. Nothing more needs to be done to this. This cake is finished. There you have it, white cake. Our cake, beautiful, but we need to look at the inside, right? Isn't that what you're waiting for, huh? Me too. I've been waiting for this all day. Very nice. I'm going to cut right here. There we are. Pull him right out, down to the plate. And gently off. There we go. That looks like a magnificent white cake to me. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there is the old saying that you can't have your cake and eat it too. And of course that is a misnomer. You're actually supposed to be saying you can't eat your cake and have it too. Which means, of course, once you're done with it, it's all gone. But until then, it's something for you to enjoy. This, fantastic. The cake itself is so light, the sponge, delicate. and the buttercream, oh, it just melts in your mouth. So you have a cake here that's ultra light, ultra soft, very moist because we used a whole stick of butter in it. And it is absolutely delicious. It's perfect for a vanilla cake. If you're looking for a white cake, something that's just a good all-purpose, this is going to more than fulfill your expectations. Thank you very much for watching this, and please, if you would, take a look right underneath this video. You're going to see my description box. Click on that. You're going to get a pop down and some links. Link to my website, which is S.A.Trotter Arts, LLC, and that's S.A.Trotter.com. My company provides these recipes. It will be also providing shirts and caps, and there's prints there. So there's a lot of stuff. Take a look. Thank you for watching this. Please look at Texas Cooking Today. There's a lot more videos, and enjoy your white cake. I will too.